Good morning and welcome to another episode of Dr. Carl Grod. I'm one of your hosts, Jameson. Consider me your resident enthusiast. And today I'm joined by
Ben, and I am serving as the position of resident theologian.
Yes, he gets older and dustier as he goes by. Pretty soon I'll have to file him away in some ancient catacomb and we'll have to just reflect on his writings till time immemorial.
Just put some mothballs so they don't eat the pages.
Right. Does that mean I should start collecting your napkins? Because if you become famous and we start giving guided tours of your
Bob
home.
Kane napkin sold for millions, so probably.
There we go. Why people tour C.S. Lewis's house, so I'm just gonna start collecting memorabilia and sell it. Like it's Elvis Presley or the theologian Ben Bernstein.
You stay away from my teapot.
You stay away from my teapot. Welcome to Graceland. Hey, that would be a great name for your home attraction. Would be Graceland.
Graceland? You know what? That sounds familiar for some reason.
It's Elvis.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just saying that as a theologian. Anyways,
We're gonna take Graceland back.
We're putting the grace back in land. It's not just for Elvis anymore. We're not here to talk about Elvis, although that could be a topic on another day. Today, we're here to discuss expansions to your hobby. Too much or not enough?
Yeah.
How much can you purchase in an area of which you enjoy before it becomes excess and you actually stop enjoying it? In the board game world, you might talk about this as expansions. In the movie world, we might talk about this as prequels or sequels. In the literature world, you might have numbered volumes, how many series or cycles, all that goes into expanding kind of the mythos. But eventually, one has to wonder, how much is too much? But as usual, before we get there, I'd like to do something completely different.
Okay.
So Ben, I'll start this week. This is something where we ask each other an unprepared question. And I know you have strong feelings on this because you constantly lecture me about board games. But I am curious, in the world of movies, are you more excited for a prequel sequel or something of original content? And why, I should say.
That's a good... Well, okay. I feel like there's generally more hype for a prequel sequel because it's established IP, right? Mm-hmm. But it often leads to disappointment.
Right, because you're talking about expectations.
The expectations get so high. Even for me, I might discover an original movie that's super awesome a year after it came out, right? And be like, this is my favorite movie. So I would say in general, original content, I would always prefer somebody taking a new pass at something as long as they do it well. Something that is new and original and being like, wow, this hasn't been done before. That's what I'd be more excited about.
Interesting. Yeah, it's hard because we live in a day and age of the Marvel universe, which this could be its own episode, but they had both sequels for some of their individual superhero storylines, but also it was kind of new IP with the same characters over 20 films. So I thought they did an interesting thing of, there's Ant-Man 2, but then there's also Civil War, there's also different Avengers movies. It all kind of plugs in. So it seems like people are starting to stretch that line because I like your reflection because it is hard because it's the hype is on here, but then on the other side, it's almost if the hype is too high, then you can't appreciate it as much as you just. I found this movie on Netflix, which came out of the Sundance Music Festival or movie festival, and now it's, wow, this is really good.
Sequels budgets are always bigger, and the ratings are usually lower.
Well, and sometimes they can't get the same director to come back. I mean, then you start dealing with Clash of Vision, which we did a whole podcast on when we talked about what happens when you don't have a unified vision for, let's say, the Star Wars trilogy. So, all right. Thanks for answering my question. So what do you have for me for today?
Sure. So my question is, if you could add one word to the official English dictionary, what would it be?
I'm going to add a word to the,
canonize a word. Pretty slang.
That is a great question for me because I am the guy that says that language is just an artificial placeholder for meaning. So
make up one then. Yeah, that's a good podcast idea, is the philosophy of language and how it's just meaningless sounds.
Man, I think I'm going to feel stumped. I don't know. What is a word?
Ooh, he's stumped.
Maybe I'll go with a good kerplump. It sounds good off the tongue. I mean, it kind of it feels like a definition, but it's more like a sound. But I would love for it to have, I would love for a kerplump to have an official definition.
What's the definition of that?
to come up with a definition as well?
No, you don't. I would just say a sound that something when something makes a
or I would like it to be something that's really obscure, like kerplump refers to a old British official that used to preside over this specific thing, and some like one of those great words where you're like, how does it? Like, I don't know, but it was some official, so now we got to use it. You're the kerplump of this town.
There's no historical background, but the dictionary says it. So you're making up false history.
Wouldn't you love
That's
for someone to be running, like Dr. Ben Burnside's running in this town for the position of kerplump?
Okay, that's all I got.
Nice. Well, that was a nice warm up. I appreciate that. You really threw me for a loop there. Kerplump. I'm gonna put it on a t-shirt now. As I said, today's episode is about expansions, and specifically expansions to our hobbies. And as I said, this will be a little different depending on your hobby. So, for a placeholder in the world of board games, we would call this expansions. In movies, we would call this sequels or prequels. As I said, in literature, you talk about the continuations of cycles or series. For a lot of you, if you play something like Magic the Gathering, obviously they have whole packs of cards that come out in different box sets that you can buy. And I think for a lot of us, even if we do something like hunting or fishing, or we have some kind of outdoor activity, a lot of my friends buy what I would call a lot of expansions to their hobby.
All hobbies are expensive.
Yes, all hobbies are expensive. And in fact, I forget, one of my friends had looked this up, but someone did a research study on like what's the percentage line you should spend on hobbies to like still be able to enjoy. And I forget the numbers. And obviously it's an not artificial, but kind of a slightly arbitrary opinion by an economist, but essentially saying like this certain percentage of your income is what you should spend on your hobbies. If you go over it, what you're probably doing is kind of being a little overindulgent. And I was amazed because for the average person, I think it's like you spend $2,000 or $3,000 a year on one of your hobbies. And what's crazy about your hobby is, unlike other purchases, like if I came up to you and said, hey, I need to buy a new television, or I need to buy X, or I need to buy this thing, it's $3,000, you're gonna be like, whoa, can't spend $3,000 on that right now. That doesn't make any sense. Let me go get the discount bin. Let me find what toaster oven do you want? I'm sorry, you can't just grill your toast over an open flame. What is the burner for in your stove? When it comes to a hobby, though, two things happen. One, you're more likely to make larger purchases because you've already, from a psychological standpoint, I think the way the study says, you've already kind of proven to yourself that you need it because you're already invested in it. So you make it a passive truth, like. Ben
already sunk this much money.
Right, you may have noticed about Burnside. He went through a stage where he really enjoyed designing and building his own keyboards. When you get to that point where you're soldering keyboards in your kitchen, if something comes up for sale for keyboards, you've already convinced yourself. You're already.
This is my thing.
That's right. And then the other thing too is, even if you're not making a large purchase, like Ben's not going out in that example and saying, "I'm going to buy this gold-plated keyboard for 10, whatever it is." But what will probably happen is he'll see micro sales. And micro sales is where it gets people a lot. Like you'll be on eBay and be like, these custom keys. Or for me, you'll be like, this board game's on sale. Or I'll say something like I boldly said, I'm not going to buy any more games for October. And all of a sudden a sale comes up on something like Manager Market or Cool Stuff Inc. And I'm like, well, now I'm just leaving money. I'm wasting money if I don't buy it. And so there's kind of this push and pull. But the issue we have, if we don't kind of acknowledge this in the beginning, is if we expand too much, there's going to be a line for all of us. Obviously, we all have means, so it's both a question of how much can you afford, but I think it's also a question of your time. How much time can you really allot? Because there's nothing worse than opening up a closet and looking at all the unopened stuff you've bought. For my birthday, Burnside was very kind and agreed to help me get an organizer for a game I've always wanted to play. And it's literally sat in my closet for almost 3 years because every time I've looked at it, I don't want to take it out and organize it. I don't want to. And so now he's going to help me with the organizer. I'll actually play it. But, one of those games is fine. If you have 20 of those games, or if you have...
It's called the Shelf of Shame.
Yeah, the Shelf of Shame. Yeah. And so maybe a lot of us have the Garage of Shame, the Closet of Shame, the Attic of Shame. And then the other crazy part, which will happen, is the longer you do this, you will literally forget that you even have these things that you own. So you'll go back in and be like, oh yeah, 2 years ago I did spend $1,000 on this. That said it was so important. And that's the other hard part is like, now that it's a sunk cost.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, we're much more likely to hold on to it. And then we're also much more likely to use it to generate sales going forward. So that's It's a lot of kind of like pseudo-psychological
I didn't know
analysis.
this was such a heavy, emotional, and convicting, guilt-shaming podcast.
I'm really here to confront Burnside about his hobbies.
This is an intervention.
This is an intervention, and I knew that if I wasn't live and he couldn't get away, that he can't turtle up right now. He's literally being recorded. So everyone,
hide all my stuff real fast.
Make direct eye contact with Ben. So I thought what we could do to tackle this is I've set up the prompts a little bit, talked about kind of how this affects, and then I thought you and I could go and just pick a couple things, a couple of our hobbies to talk about what we enjoy about them.
Yeah.
And then maybe share a little bit of times maybe where we've been a little overindulgent and we haven't, like it's been too much.
Yeah.
And then maybe explain have you ever had seasons where maybe it hasn't been enough? And so we could feel comfortable to expand, because this is all about balance.
Balance.
Right? And so, Ben, I've done a lot of the initial talking. I'd love to hear what are the things that you've kind of reflected on, one of your hobbies or outlets.
Sure. So, first of all, I just want to acknowledge that not everyone is a hobby person. As far as like finding that one area where you just like want to spend time and enjoyment, you might do a lot of normal things or maybe you don't think of yourself as having a hobby. But for those of us that do, is kind of that area where you get refreshed and kind of pour passion into, it brings some sort of enjoyment. And for some people, that's going and playing golf. Some people, that's, like you said, going hunting. For us, it's sitting inside and playing board games. For other people, it's reading, or quilting. There's a million hobbies. And I'm a big advocate of hobbies. I think that, especially in today's world, everything's so stressful. Right. And especially if you have a really busy life and you have kids and everything else, you can just push yourself and continuously drain yourself. And for me, a hobby is me intentionally trying to fill myself back up so you can be more healthy and have more energy for things. Now, I don't have kids, so I don't want to pass any judgment because I obviously have time to do that. But anyway, I say all that to say I love hobbies. Now, let's get to the main topic we're talking about. My main issue is I have a lot of hobbies, probably too many hobbies. And I get really into one for like 6 months to a year.
This is something I think you and I have so much in common. Yeah, we are collectors of hobbies.
So, collectors of hobbies. Oh god, yeah, I have different rooms in my house. So, I would say like 4 or 5 years ago, I got into collecting vintage video games, and the hobby was going to all the stores I could find and seeing what rare or weird thing that they have, and I filled up a bookshelf of them. And eventually I didn't stop doing that because I ran out of storage room, and then I realized these are pretty boxes and they just sit on my shelf. Most of the games I've played or I can beat them relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. And so like they offer limited enjoyment other than just being there. I don't really regret doing it, but at a certain point the investment stopped coming.
Yeah, it sounds almost like the video game part of it turns more into almost like a piece of artwork.
Yeah, exactly.
It's for its artistic value, or it's commemorative for collective value. But.
Yeah, same thing with comic books, really. And so, like, there's never a time where I'm going to say that was a bad hobby and sell them all. I might buy some in the future, but right now that's not my obsession. I'm not spending every day on eBay because I'm a deep dive researcher, right. As I know you are as well. So you said keyboards. I got into keyboards. And I know that that's not a hobby that's easily explainable even to the super nerdy. But let me tell you, there's a whole rabbit hole if you want to go down. Just go on Reddit and type in.
For the record, I don't often want to interrupt Ben, but I have to tell you the story.
Okay.
So I was in College Station at the time, and you had moved to Cyprus when you started this, right?
Yeah.
So he used to be in Beaumont, so we had to coordinate a little bit more about how to see each other. So he's in Cyprus. We're much closer than College Station. I'm going to come hang out. And he told me a couple weeks in advance, like, by the way, I've kind of started looking into keyboards, and I've been looking at them. I'm like, oh, that's neat. And in my mind, I'm thinking
musical keyboards.
Yeah, or just like keyboards for the computer. I didn't know what that meant. Maybe he was buying a couple because you've always been big on like building and designing your own equipment. I didn't know if you were looking for. So I show up to his house, and his kitchen table is completely covered in a soldering kit, and he's already making his own keyboards. So when he says deep dive, let's not undersell the level of deep dive. When I was taking it as passing curiosity. When I showed up, we were in. If he had told me he'd opened up his own Etsy business, there would have been evidence on display that he was now selling keyboards out of his kitchen.
No, I very much operate on the thing, don't make money from your hobby or else you'll hate your hobby.
Right.
But anyway, so yes, I got into that, but then I, got to the point where I had made a lot, and as you say, like sales are coming up. Oh, this is only going to be available for one time. And in that area of the hobby, you sign up to buy something and you get it 18 months later.
Yeah.
So I had this like...
Golly.
So when I said, you know what, I have enough keyboards. No one needs as many keyboards. I have 3 computers. I only need really 3 keyboards. But anyway, I stopped the hobby, but I still kept getting crap in the mail that I had ordered. And still love keyboards. Never am not going to love keyboards. But yeah, so recently it's been board games. And there is an excess. When you have too many board games, you only have so much time in the world to play board games, especially with other people. So what I've done is taken a page from you of going through my collection and saying, I love this game, but I would choose a different game over it. So I recently packed up a box and shipped a whole bunch of them away to make some room. So I'm not the poster child for minimalism or not having a bunch of stuff. I do have mini collections, but right now I'm trying to thin out them all to do it. And right now I'm into board games, and maybe I always go in and out of video games. I never play them too long. But yeah, with
It's a constant. I feel like video games isn't fair because, for me at least, maybe it's the same way for you. It's not so much that we're in and out of video games as much as sometimes a great game comes along. Like when Zelda Breath of the Wild comes along, we're going to find a way to play that.
Yeah.
Which is different than me saying, I'm not going to get invested in the whole new Nintendo cycle and play every game that comes out.
Right, yeah. Whenever I have a backlog of games that I want to play, that I've bought, that I don't have time for. But that's a huge sunk cost. And whenever you're in it, whenever you start playing and you start guilting yourself of saying, I need to dump the 20 hours to finish this game so I can start this game, it becomes, for me, it becomes work, it becomes stressful. So I just have to be like, video games are fun, and if I play one, I play it, and if I don't, that's fine.
Yeah.
You just have to let go.
Right, it's not even this is work, it's like it's volunteer work. You're not even getting paid for this.
No, it's just for your own thing.
Yeah, I will force myself to take a Saturday to finish the story, to get, and then...
And I'm not even into competitive gaming anymore, but that's a huge sunk cost.
So maybe, and not that you have to necessarily be clarified against some of the parameters I talked about, but I'm just, maybe for our listeners to listen to what you just shared, it sounds like you've had seasons where you've been like, this is too much. And it sounds like with board gaming, you're kind of experiencing, okay, I like this hobby, I want to enjoy it. So in some ways too, I think gardening is maybe one of the ultimate hobbies that a lot of people listening might be into. A lot of people are into gardening, but it's the whole pruning, right? You can't just keep planting stuff in your bed. You eventually have to trim stuff back. You have to make room. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm hearing. Like if your bookshelf is literally your flower bed, you have created space to then enjoy the games, as opposed to, one of the reasons I had to say I wasn't going to buy games in October is I have a giant stack that won't even fit on my shelves in my office. Like, okay, well, I have it's like looking at your garden full of weeds. This has to change before I can go back to enjoying gardening. So thanks. And I do appreciate your vulnerability in saying that you're a collector of hobbies, because that's something that you and I always do. We'll be, I remember when you came over to my house once and we were into Mondo screen printing for a while, into movie posters, and he showed me one by Lorraine Dureau. Mm-hmm. I was about to say, Vincent is a board game artist. I was combining two meetings. But he showed me this amazing set that he did over Hitchcock films.
Yeah.
I think you ended up getting the Vertigo one, and I had the Psycho one
right
in my office at church. And talk about a deep dive. I learned everything about screen printing. I studied up on Mondo. It got me really into the Alamo Draft House. Got me back in. It was months of just me reading and studying. I got into the difference between like digital creation, something like Phantom City and their really awesome Batman animated series print, all of this stuff. That was off of one conversation with you. So you got to be careful when someone visits your house, like, hey, by the way.
If you're that kind of person, yeah.
Right. And so Ben and I were almost, I don't want to use this word too aggressively. I was going to say addicts, but that may have it's a pretty serious connotation. I'm just saying that we have an addictive personality that I feel like the two of us together sometimes we to each other kind of be like, Ben, I want to show you something, but I don't want you to do anything with it, all right? Wait a week.
This is just for sharing.
That's right.
I'm an expert now.
And even in board gaming, we've talked about how holding each other accountable to trying not to buy the games that we own unless it's a game that we're going to regularly play about the other person. So, like Grand Austria Hotel is becoming one of my favorite games. I technically should have waited to play your copy before I bought one, but I've been waiting on the fence to get it, and then Ben got it, and I jumped in. So this is maybe a good segue for me. I'll talk about two things that are very similar. I went into a huge deep dive. I can say I avoided the collective video game phase with
you
Ben.
had one.
I did. I got my favorite game. One of my favorite games. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have both of my favorite games from the Super Nintendo, which is Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG. I just have one that's CIB, complete in box. So.
Okay, keep going.
Anyways, the point is, they're in my closet. I do look at them from time to time because that's where collective video games should go, is in your closet, because it keeps the light off of them. But I did get really into comic books, especially Stan Lee, 1960s. Pretty much anything before the death of Gwen Stacy, which is kind of the shift in some of that early Jack Kirby art. Not that he kept being a prolific artist, but he definitely was the focus of most Marvel comics up to a certain point. Him and John Romita, who did Spider-Man, probably the most iconic Spider-Man art. And so I have many comics that are in Smithsonian archival sleeves and shells. You may not believe this, there are arguments over who is the best rater of comic books. You can get into arguments over whether or not...
Because when we love something, we put it into a plastic shell that cannot be opened.
Anywho, the point is, one of the things that I wrestled with is I kept finding deals and I kept getting invested, and this was early in my marriage, and so I had a lot more disposable income, and so I could invest in it. And one thing I didn't realize is my wife and I always had this kind of thing, if we get a little extra money, half of it goes towards kind of like the family budget, so we need to do a project in the backyard, pay a few extra bills, but the other half goes to you. It's like kind of like play money. I've told you this before, like do something you wouldn't normally do. Well, all of that money went into collectible comic books. So suddenly I found myself with a pretty aggressively large collection.
Right.
And after a certain point, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these boxes of
Stare
art?
at your pretties.
Yeah, and it was, I just remember that distinct feeling of walking to the house in College Station and opening up my closet and just feeling almost despair, because I'm like, this is so much money that I've sunk.
Yeah.
And what's the point? And I don't say that to in any way diminish collectible comics. I love them. I keep up with it. I still have my subscription that lets me track markets, and I look at it, but that is now the extent of my hobby.
Yeah.
The little GPA analysis subscription that we share, that is how much I spend on collectible comics these days, just because I like to read up on the reports and stay up on it. But it was amazing how quickly you get in, right? Like you sink so much money. And the other hard thing too is with comics, I made so many mistakes just on pricing and what you purchase. That's the biggest thing I would say to anyone. If you get into a hobby, don't assume because what someone's selling something for is what you have to buy it for. But also, don't look for the cheapest thing, because often you get what you pay for. So it's that hard line of like knowing what something should be priced at, and then if it's a little bit more, am I willing to make that splurge to have it? And then it's also about, when do you get out? So for us, a lot of our comic books really taken off in value. Like we couldn't even buy some of the ones that we own now, because 10 years ago, you got to remember, we got into, of all the things we've ever done, we were literally like into oil before oil was discovered.
Yeah, before the bubble.
We got into collectible comics like right at, I think we were maybe right at the first Avengers movie.
Yeah, it was like 20.
So you were starting to see a kind of like a kind of I think we were reading comic books. I'm talking about like collecting vintage.
Yeah, it was like right when we got out.
Right when we graduated seminary. And so we were at the beginning of that, and now you look at some of our books and they're like 5 times the value. And this isn't to brag or anything, it's just to say, all right, so I appreciate that, but now the hard part I have is I'm struggling to get rid of some of mine. Like you converted one of your really valuable ones into an awesome espresso machine, which this espresso machine is brought to you by the first appearance of Wolverine. Thank
Cheers.
you, Incredible Hulk 181. This latte brought to you by Incredible Hulk 181. Because when you need a backup villain character, go with Wolverine. That's right, folks. Wolverine, one of the most iconic characters in all of comics, was a sidekick villain character against like the Wendigo or someone the Hulk was fighting, and then all of a sudden they were like, well, who's this guy? They're like, okay, launch. But I kind of consider Wolverine to be the Batman of the Marvel universe. Like, he's in everything. He is one of the most popular characters. I'm off on a tangent here. The point is...
So one thing I want to say is, maybe you're listening to this and you think, wow, this is great advice. Maybe you're listening to this and saying, they spent how much on who what now?
Right.
Now, I will come to the defense and say, because recently I've been looking a little bit into golf and stuff.
Yeah.
And golf is ridiculously expensive.
Yes it is.
And it's the same concept. You can buy a driver that's decently used for like $150, or you can buy the brand new driver and get it fit to you for $500.
Right.
And it's just like, I don't know. I think that maybe we don't make the income to be regular golfers, but like if you're walking around with $4,000 in your bag versus, $100 in your bag, I don't know. It's just like everything is expensive. And I always say it to my dad, because he always says, oh, you have so many video games. Much money have we spent on video games? I was like, well, Dad, your hobby is collecting classic cars.
Yeah, your dad needs to back off. He built a venue in his backyard to host venues. It's really for his antique and vintage car collection.
Well, it's not just his; it's the whole Big Town community. But yes,
whatever. The point is, your dad. Let's just say, when it comes to Burnside, the apple is not far from the tree. When it comes to his father, all right.
So anyway, I'd rather spend my money piecemeal, $50 at a time, rather than drop whatever on a boat or something.
Sure,
but that's just me. We all have our things.
That's a good point, and I think then what we really have is. I think hobbies really fall into two categories. So my first one is collectibles. Like things that you get to not really be used, but to be displayed in some way. Mm-hmm. And then you have what I call usables, or just like a more active hobby. So that's why I wanted to bring up board games, because I got into board games because I had a child, really. And what I realized is I'm also a big video gamer, especially longer, more involved, story-driven games, RPGs, whatever. When you have a child, you don't have 40 hours in any kind of consistent way to dedicate, or at least I did, in a way where I could play it to even keep up with the story. I mean, if you're playing 8 hours broken up over 10 days,
it requires focus.
It's too hard. So, a lot of video games I play, or anything I can play in like an hour. So like, set match games, Diablo 3, something like that. So it's a pick up and play. But board games interested me because I could play a game in an hour or two, and then it'd be done. You put it away. And so I got really deep down the rabbit hole. But the hard part is, we run into the other side, is if it's an active hobby, have you purchased more than you have the capacity to even play?
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, is if you go down any hobby route, so this is board games, for instance, movies would be another thing, anything that requires your time, focus, and attention, you could toss in video games.
Yeah, your time becomes more valuable than...
Right. You can't consume everything. And it's I kind of got to the point where, like, I'm almost saying no. I'm not saying, let me clarify. I'm not saying no to any board game, which means I have all this stuff on my shelf that I'm not going to play, and things would be on my shelf for so long. I had gotten rid of games. I'm like, I'm never going to play that.
Yeah.
And though I literally bought something to hold it, to give it away. I guess I'm pre-purchasing birthday gifts at that point. So congratulations, Ben. The present that you're getting a year from now is the game I bought 2 years ago. Congratulations.
Yeah.
But Ben's like, what's wrong with that model?
I love.
But I think we have to wrestle with that, right? Is like, you have to be honest. And this is maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, but have you bitten off more than you can chew? Have you invested more than you can actually use? Because at the end of the day, then it's becoming wasteful. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to negatively impact your feeling about it.
Yeah.
Because you're both going to want to keep trying new things. Like, if we're honest, if you're in a hobby, you're not going to be able to resist getting, like, I cannot buy a game for a month. I don't know if I couldn't buy a game for 2021. So if I say that, then I need to know I need to clear stuff off.
Right. Well, because then you find another hobby and spend money on that.
Right. And so I guess what we're left with is this balancing act of, am I invested in the right way? Am I not? Can I actually use this? What do I like about it?
Yeah.
And I think what it really is, it's about being mindful and just appreciative of what you have, which sounds a little trite and almost like a Hallmark card, but I think it's true. Like, being present with your hobby, it's almost like what I tell people in marriage counseling sometimes. Just remember, on your worst day, your absolute worst day, when you're fighting over where the toothbrush goes or whatever your argument is that's launched into World War III, you both wanted to be here. And that's kind of how I feel about hobbies. On my worst day when I'm feeling overwhelmed by my closet, I have to tell myself, no one did this to you.
Yeah. You made all these decisions.
That's right. All of these boxes represent purchases. And so, Ben, I'm curious, what do you do to kind of recenter yourself? How do you refocus?
This is the biggest first world problems.
Oh my gosh, yes. Done. I really hope no one dealing with the real troubles of the world.
So to answer your question, I remember that the point of doing hobbies for me is to use downtime I have to kind of disconnect and refresh myself from my day-to-day work stresses, life stresses, whatever. And so it should be life-giving, right? And if you get to the point where it's not life-giving, and like you said earlier, it feels like a job or a task, something you have to keep up with, and it's not worth it because you're literally doing it to enjoy yourself. So, for another hobby I have, since we're just laying them all out on the table, I also like to paint miniatures. And I bought a couple board games that had a bunch of miniatures because I was like, I'm going to paint these. That'd be so fun. Well, it takes a long time to do them, and I don't always feel like painting. I can't paint every day. I'm not a machine, right? And so like my queue was up into like there's no way I'll finish all these for like 2 years, And that doesn't mean that I was dropping $1,000. Like a box with $40 of miniatures will take me like 6 months to paint because I do it obsessively, right? Anyway, the point is I just decided, you know what? I'm never going to do those. And so I sold the games, got my money back. And then it's like, I'm not going to take on projects that chain me to something unless I can jump in and do it with joy. Because anytime it feels like, oh man, like you're beating yourself up, I really need to paint those stormtroopers. Like my life's not going to be great until I can get those done because you're assigning a task to yourself. So centering is basically saying, if it's not bringing me joy, I'm not going to do it. Because the point is I guess joy is a theological concept that only Christ gives us. If it's not bringing me centeredness and some happiness in my life, then it's not worth doing. I don't need more stress.
I'm happy.
I don't need to stress myself.
I'm happy you brought up the joy and kind of biblical angle because I would say hobbies to me are a manifestation of Sabbath.
Yeah.
In the sense that if we look at the biblical concept of Sabbath, which I love, one of the pastors in our area preached, I can't remember if it was a sermon series on Ten Commandments or what he was preaching on, but he essentially said, we're against breaking all the Ten Commandments except we brag about breaking the commandment to honor the Sabbath. In our context, it's first world problems, American problems, we brag about Sabbath, breaking Sabbath.
Yeah.
It's interesting how in Europe they break other commandments, but they're very big on the Sabbath. I mean, some communities, Spain, for example, have that built into the day. Like you take a break every day, they go on holidays, they have months of vacation. Like, there's a huge aspect of that. In America, it feels like we brag about almost not having hobbies, working too much. I can't see how many people that post almost proudly how much they work on vacation.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you may not have to work on vacation, but I am saying remember the point of going on vacation is to like get away, to recover. And so hobbies to me, from a biblical perspective, you're looking at the commandments in Exodus and what the Israelites are called to, if you're looking at what Jesus talks about in the Gospels, you need to have things in your life you do for the pleasure of doing them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not about to make a theological case that like I can honor and glorify God by playing board games unless I feel like God's trying to tell me that, and then I will take up that gold standard. But I am saying that I don't want to take something that's for pleasure's sake, that's for the simplicity of like we're created just to enjoy the life that we've been given. Because I do think there's a community. I like board games because it brings people together, relational. But if I'm overindulgent, if I'm not keeping the right perspective, then I'm almost breaking that commandment.
Yeah.
All over again. And I think that's a really challenging thing for all of us that if we're honest, we're not very good at. Got any other thoughts from maybe scripture where you're kind of thinking, yeah, that seems to register?
Well, I think the most apt one is about the parable that Jesus tells where a guy just keeps getting food and builds a barn to hold his other food. Yeah. So it's just like, if you ever find yourself building another barn to hold your stuff, maybe you should thin it out.
Did you hear that, Artie Burnside? If you find yourself building a wedding venue in your backyard to hold your cars. I'm just kidding.
He's worked his whole life, and if he wants to retire, that's what he gets to do. But
I totally agree with Burnside. I'm really just being funny. I'm sorry. I should not. I'm not trying to throw shade. That is totally correct.
But yeah, none of this stuff is going with us.
Right.
So we don't need to tie any of our self-worth to that. I feel like I don't do that. Maybe I do in some respect, but yeah, there's definitely danger in it. But I do think that, like you said, like Sabbath is about taking moments to give yourself new life, to disconnect and unplug. And we're not good at that. And I don't care if for us it's sitting inside playing board games. For you it might be going out in the yard and working, Leah likes to do that, and
Sure, I know that's anathema to me, but I know that some people.
It's completely anathema to me. But whatever it is, what brings you joy and rest probably tortures another person. Like
Sure.
Sabbath is not unilateral and never will be.
Yeah, and maybe the best summation of this, which is a good focal point of this whole conversation, is Jesus' reflection that man was not created for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was created for man. The idea that Sabbath is not a punishment. It's not like a lawful obligation that you're supposed to fall under. It's a gift to remember, in my mind, that you are not God.
Yeah.
And if you're slightly less religious, that you're not in control of the universe, and that it's okay for you to take time and moments just to be.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. It's about refocusing that you're not God, essentially, whatever that means to you. For us, that obviously has a specific context. And that's how I focus on my hobbies. When I'm gaming with you, like on a Friday, and that's a contained space, am I able to leave that and then go back to my family? Does it have an actual moment of enjoyment, or is it filled with anxiety because we don't get to these 5 games, I got 5 more on my shelf.
And it's like, so in all of this, I think what we're saying is balance. Don't collect so much that you drive yourself crazy.
Right.
But also, whatever it is that brings you, that Sabbath moment, that recharging, whatever it is, do it. And if you don't have one, maybe get one. I don't know. But balance.
Hobbies are cool, and I would say just take, much like value meals, buy one at a time. If you buy. All right. So I appreciate you joining us in a conversation on too much or not enough as it pertains to our hobbies and our interest. One of the things we do at the very end is to talk about something exciting that we're interested in, that we've done, that we're looking forward to, that's going on currently. I've tried to break down the temporal nature of this. It's the feedback I've gotten from my co-host. So, Ben, what is something that you are kind of excited about?
Sure. So last time we podcasted, you talked about Board Game Co. And I actually did that. I took your advice and I did it, and I bubble wrapped up 9 different games, put them into a giant shipping box, dealt with FedEx and all the fun that comes with that, and shipped them off. And now I have holes in my shelf, and it feels good.
Did you use their discount?
I did use their discount because, this is really in the weeds, but I sent a game before without a discount. It was $15 for one game, and I paid like $20-something for a 22-pound box.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, I could go on. We could do a whole tangential podcast on why I don't understand the shipping and there needs to be a better way to trade. Board Game Co is an awesome way to trade. You should totally use them. I'm talking about BGG market in general.
It's $15 shipping flat.
Oh, it's so expensive. That being said, I want to celebrate that. Congratulations! You got your hobbies under control.
For now.
So proud of you.
For now.
What am I excited about? Well, I'm going to go to the athletic side and just say, as terrible as it is, and as much as I hope everyone is safe, I'm very happy that college football is back. That may be surprising to some of you who are listening to this. I'm a big sports fan as well. College football and college sports.
What kind of sports ball is that?
Sports ball. It's the one where you play it. It's the opposite of the way the Europeans play. It's the other kind of football. Not soccer. But it's just fun. The Aggies have already been crushed by Alabama, so it's a great season already. Things just feel normal. When
we make that our first game and just get out of the way?
When A&M gets absolutely blown out by someone, it just means that fall and cool weather is here. So, all that being said, we're really thankful you came and joined us today on this podcast. We really enjoy getting a chance to talk about our hobbies, our interests, and maybe offer up a reflection on how all of us can engage in a better, more life-giving way with the things that we really love and appreciate. As always, I've been Jameson.
And I'm Ben. Goodbye.